Hey everyone, and welcome back to Small Engine Edge. Today we're going to talk a little bit about something I think all of us go through when we're starting up a small engine repair company, and that's what should we be charging customers for parts that we're getting for them. So whether you're selling it to them just as a part or whether you're fixing it for them, what kind of markup should you be making on those items? It is not standard across the board. There are different areas where you make more or less, but I'm going to go through all the different margins that we charge and why we do those things in those different areas. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons as we go along if you enjoy the content. You just heard me mention both markup and margin there. We're going to talk markup for the rest of the video. I think it's a little easier for most people to understand than margin is. Our standard markup on most things is going to be 50%. Now that's a 33.33% margin. You can study into how those things differ if you'd like, or you're unsure of how they differ, but 50% markup, meaning if we pay $100 for something, we charge $150 for it. That does not count for everything in the building though. There's many different areas where we charge more or less depending on what it is. 50% is just kind of our base that we go off of. So we order a lot of different things from distributors. Those are going to make a little bit more on most items because we get a bigger discount. Us getting that bigger discount, you can, if you'd like to, pass some of those savings on to the customer. But just because we pay $2 less for it doesn't mean that we shouldn't make that additional amount. So a lot of those that we get from distributors or say aftermarket parts, rotary, or if you're just the Amazon or the eBay guy ordering off of there, sometimes you can get really good deals as long as you're sure that they're quality parts. Charge what the going rate is for that part. It's all about perception for that customer. What do they perceive the value of that item to be? And that's where we try to fall, is what the perceived value of whatever said item is. So if you're ordering standard parts and you've got a distributor, you're going to make a little bit better money. If you're just the Amazon and eBay guy, your standard markup is probably not going to be much more than 25 to 35%, especially when you talk OEM parts. OEM parts, you don't want to be much over the retail price of them. You don't want to be charging 50% more than what somebody can go online and purchase that for. That does not mean go and compete with Amazon. Don't go to Amazon and say, hey, well, they're charging this, that's what I should charge, because that's not what you should be charging. You can't compete with Amazon. Amazon is out there making only 5 or 10% margin on everything, and they're focused on market share. It's not somebody you're trying to compete with. So if you're charging anywhere from 10 to 25% more than Amazon, that's going to be perfectly fine. And the reason for that is, one, you're not competing with them, and two, the customer is going to be happy because of your services. That's what you're selling. You can be higher than some of those online outlet stores. That's okay. But normally, I try to stay, if I'm paying a retail price from something, whether it's online or whether it's here in town from a distributor, or say I go get a steel part, if I didn't have my discount, I would only charge about 15% more on top of what that retail price is. And that's just the standard markup for something that I'm pretty close to a retail price on. I'm not going to go much over that retail price because then you get a bad name for price gouging. You don't want to gouge people. You want to be fair with people. Those are the places you're going to make the least amount of money, though, is when you don't have an account set up with different companies and you're ordering OEM parts. If you're using aftermarket parts, again, you've got to make sure they're a good quality. Say carburetors, for instance, for us. We pay $10 to $15 for a carburetor, but we're charging $35 at the very least for those carburetors. We always try to use the HUAYI brand, Huahi, or however you'd like to pronounce it, which is what many of the OEMs actually use. So Kohler, for instance, their carburetors, they used to be branded Kohler. Now I've seen some come in with Huahi on them, but every company out there uses a distributor, uses a manufacturer to make these parts for them. They are not the manufacturer of these parts anyway. So they're all aftermarket parts. Everything is just a manufacturer that the original producer of the equipment chose for the production of that item. You got to keep that in mind. So we're using those carburetors and we add value to those carburetors. We open every carburetor, whether OEM or aftermarket, up and see if there's metal in the bowl of it. Make sure everything looks good. You would be very surprised how many times I find metal in the bowl of carburetors, whether it's OEM or aftermarket. So we always do that. That's adding the value for the customer, and the customer is going to perceive that value of that carburetor to be $35. I believe if you go and you charge too little, say we're buying it for $10 and we're charging $15 for it. Well, it's a Huahi carburetor, kind of same brand as the OEM would put on it. But if I'm charging $15, that customer is going to think that we're putting a crappy carburetor on it just because that carburetor did not cost enough. That was a lesson my dad taught me. He taught me about KBC bearings when they first started stocking them. They are a value brand. They are made, I believe, in Korea, but they cost quite a bit less than many bearings, although the quality is the same. So they were buying these for about $1 and selling them for $3 or $4 to customers. And customers started instantly complaining, saying, "Oh, I don't want that cheap stuff on my equipment. I want a quality bearing." So they talked about it and they're like, well, let's raise the price. They raised the price to $10 or $12 and nobody complained again. They were perfectly happy with the bearings. The bearings were a good quality, but the customer did not perceive the value of that bearing to be good. They didn't perceive it to be a good bearing because they weren't paying enough. That is a very good example of why you should charge enough for parts and why you should get the money out of something that you can. If the retail value of something is X amount, get at least that amount or around that amount. There's no reason you should leave that money on the table. I get it if you're trying to help somebody out, you may lower the price or give them a good deal on something, but for standard purposes, you want to make as much as you can on every one of those items. Wow, the flies are horrible this morning. So that's on just a few of those different areas. When we go to aftermarket blades, say rotary blades, rotary spindles, rotary idler pulleys. We use a lot of rotary stuff. It's good quality. The only reason it gets a bad name is because consumers put it on and don't know what they're doing. But on those things, normally we pay, $6, $8, $10 for a blade, and we're charging $20 or more. So we're making quite a bit more. We're making 2 times our money or more, 2.5 times on a lot of those aftermarket items. You want to get to where that item is a good margin. There I go with margin again, right? Is a good markup for you. I normally talk margin, so it's hard for me to say markup. But you want to get to where you have a good markup on those items. You want to make good money because margins is what funds your business. We're all in business to make money, right? Some things you make very good money on and some things you make very bad money on. For instance, our oil. We pay about $2 a quart for oil. We charge $8 or right around there for a quart of oil. And customers are perfectly happy with that. The perceived value is there. Everyone expects to pay that $7 to $8 range for oil. So no problem. Make the money that you can in the areas you can with the markups you can. So when you're talking about smaller stuff, normally if it's below $5, we do at the very least a 2 times markup. So if we're paying $5, we're gonna charge $10 for it. Okay, 2 times whatever your cost is. Say primer bulbs, say fuel filters, a lot of your air filters, your fuel line, all of your smaller stuff, your fuel shutoffs, any of the smaller things that are under $5, we get at least that amount on. Anything 5 to 10, we get anywhere from 1 times complete markup. Anywhere from 100% to 150% markup on those. Everywhere else above that $10 mark, it's just on those small things. You can normally get that or above depending on what you're paying for it. So look at what you're paying and look at the actual retail value of that part and charge close to the retail value. If you're only charging 10 or 15% markup on most things, you're not charging nearly enough, and that's not enough to cover issues that arise. So say you get a carburetor in and there's an issue with it and you have to end up warranting that out or whatever the part is, that's something that you've got to factor in when you're doing these margins. If you're only 10 or 15%, that's not nearly enough for any business to survive, even if you have very little overhead. I'd say at the very least 25% on most things is going to be a great place to start. And again, I would go much over that in most areas anyway. If you're not getting good prices up front on these OEM parts, again, you're not going to make as much. But once you get into distributors and stuff like that, like some of the 4915 88S Briggs & Stratton air filters, for instance, We pay $1.99 a piece when we buy 336 of them, and we're charging over $6. You have ones that you'll make great money on, and you have ones that you won't make as good of money on. Again, look at that retail price and get close to that. If it's something you're paying almost close to retail, you can charge a little bit over. Those customers are going to be happier to pay you a little bit more for those parts and pay a little bit less for your labor and get good service. That's why those customers are going to keep coming back to you. And it's not going to be a big deal with those customers that you're paying just a little bit, that they're paying just a little bit more for those. Even if they decide to search it on Amazon and say, oh, well, hey, I could have got it for this. Well, oh, well, I paid a little bit less for labor there. Our parts are normally right around what the big guys charge. Again, if we're getting some of those steel or Echo parts, places where we're not a distributor, we're paying a little bit more, even though we have a discount with the distributor. So we may be just over that retail price. But again, customers are happy because they're getting the faster service, better service, and our labor rates are ultimately lower too. So they're saving money elsewhere by using you. Say we can't find a part, so we go to Amazon or eBay and we order a tire or a sealed battery or some sort of belt for something that we need. Again, that standard markup is going to be 50%. That's what those customers are going to pay if they were to pay and buy that here in town retail. They're not going to pay that eBay or Amazon price. I hesitate to order from eBay normally because it takes quite a bit longer, and I only use that as a last resort. But sometimes you have to source parts, and there they are. Well, you can get them. It'll be a little bit longer. You let the customer know that. Again, those price markups will vary depending on what you're purchasing. If I'm going on Amazon or eBay to purchase that and it's a steel part, I'm already at pretty well retail. So I'm only going to be able to mark that up maybe 15%, right? You've got to figure out kind of what that part would go for around here and figure out what the perceived value of that it is, or the value that somebody is willing to pay. Definitely don't gouge people. Don't just go 50% across the board, because you're going to get much pushback from customers. But the way we do it, where we're figuring out exactly what something like that would cost locally, or figuring out close to that, not going much over it, customers are perfectly happy. They never complain about the prices of anything. And I mean, everything goes up. So you've got to make sure as these parts go up, if they're in your computer, you've got to make sure that the price raises in the computer too. These margins, again, the markup is going to pay for the mistakes that you make. Sometimes you'll be selling these things, if you've got employees and nobody's paying attention to prices, you'll be selling stuff for less than what you paid for it. Going backwards is not the way to do it. So build in enough of this markup that you can cover the mistakes. You can cover the ordered part that's going to sit on the shelf for 6 years before you sell it. They need to be high enough that you pay for those things, that the margins and the markup covers those mistakes. It covers those bad parts you get, or the parts you have to warranty out, without emptying your bank account. Especially as you're starting out, if you're charging 10 or 15% markup, you're not going to have enough in that bank account to cover something if something goes wrong. It's very low markup on many items, again, but a lot of them are very high markup. Across the board, we make right about a 40% markup on everything. So margin on that is what, 28%, somewhere in there, which is good, I think, for small engine repair, and we're perfectly happy with it. And that does account in for shrinkage or anything you lose or have to warranty out and all of those things. So pretty good deal across the board, though. 50% markup just off the top, and work your way from there. Figure out where it needs to be. Once you get in tune with a lot of this stuff, once you see the aftermarket parts that you charge, 2 or 3 times for, and some of it you make very little on, it'll all average out. So I don't worry too much about it, because the high margin and the low margin ones will bring you somewhere right in the middle. Hopefully this has helped you at least figure it out a little bit more as far as what you should be marking things up and how you're going to do it going forward so you can make more money. Obviously, we're all in business to make money. We don't want to gouge people. We want to treat them fairly, though, and give them the value for whatever they are purchasing. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you have a wonderful day. Continue to dream big, and you will continue to go far. Thanks for watching.